Welcome back to Only Talk Sports, where we talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Rose Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. Now, today we're going to be taking a break from previewing college football teams, and we're about to be previewing the conferences as a whole before the college football season starts and the week one games as well. But today we have the preseason AP top 25 for college football in 2023, and I'm going to go up and down this list and see if I think that these teams are ranked about where they should be. Now, obviously, all of this is subjective because we do not know how good these teams are going to be before these teams even start to play just yet. Sometimes teams can do better or worse than you might think that they're going to do, and they move up and down these rankings very quickly right as the season starts. Even sometimes top 10 teams can fall out of the top 25 poll to never return. It happens almost every year, at least one or two teams in the top 10, but it's going to be really interesting. But some of these teams we can get a pretty good idea of where they're going to be. But let's start out with the Georgia Bulldogs. Now, Georgia obviously is a team that's won the last two national titles, so there's no surprise that they're the number one team this year. Some people could argue that they lost too much talent on defense and they don't have Stetson Bennett anymore, but still, Georgia has a loaded roster. They get top recruiting classes every single year. And since they have won the last two national titles, you kind of have to put them at number one until they prove it to you otherwise that they are not by losing a game that they shouldn't, or really just losing a game in general. Georgia being the number one team makes complete sense until proven otherwise. Michigan at number two. I know that a lot of people are like, they lost to TCU. Maybe they shouldn't be number two right now. But still, the Michigan Wolverines have been a dominant team in the Big Ten lately. They've beaten Ohio State the last two seasons. They made the college football playoff, and they've got J.J. McCarthy back, and they got Blake Corn back, and a really solid defensive unit returning as well. I think that the Michigan Wolverines will be fine. They have a fairly easy non-conference schedule, and I think that they should have a great shot to run the table in the Big Ten until they get to that Ohio State game, where that's going to be a massive showdown at the end of the year. But I get why Michigan's number two, because they have beaten Ohio State the last 2 years. Ohio State at number three makes sense. Yes, you are losing C.J. Stroud, but Ohio State still has a really solid team. They've got Marvin Harrison back. They've got a pretty solid defensive unit returning as well, and I do feel like the Ohio State Buckeyes are a team that a lot of people are potentially sleeping on because they have lost to Michigan the last 2 years. They could get the Wolverines back this season. That's going to be a fantastic game to end the season like it usually is. It's going to be some massive stakes again this year, but Ohio State I get at number three as well. No complaints at all for me in the top three. I don't have any problems with Alabama at number four either, because Alabama does have some question marks at the quarterback position, and they have lost a lot of talent as well. I don't think Alabama is slipping like some people are saying. I've even seen projections where Alabama is going to go 8-4. I think that they're at least going to go 10-2. I've already made a video talking about the Alabama Crimson Tide, previewing their season this year, but I think that whoever starts at quarterback for Alabama, whether it's Tyler Buckner or Jalen Milroe, I still feel like Alabama has enough talent to be a top five team, and I think that number four is definitely a justifiable ranking. Now, this next group of teams is really interesting because I think that all five of these teams could possibly make the college football playoff if everything breaks their way. All five of these teams are talented enough, and they have a lot of hype coming into the season. LSU at five, though, I think could be a bit high. I know that they have Jay Daniels back, and they were able to beat Alabama last year, and LSU was very competitive until the end of the season where they lost to Texas A&M and got blown out against Georgia in the SEC championship game. But I actually would argue LSU could be a bit lower because it's going to be very tough for them in the SEC this season to repeat the success they had last year. They have a really solid team. They've got a lot of talent like they always do, but LSU at five seems a bit high. USC at number six, I can't really complain because USC looks like the best team in the Pac-12, at least on the offensive end, because they have the Heisman winner, Caleb Williams, back on the offense for next season. They have a really talented team on the offensive end. The defense looks like it's going to be better, but USC is in the Pac-12 where you feel like they should dominate the conference as a whole, but it's still going to be tough for them to face some of the top teams in the Pac-12 like Washington, Oregon, Utah. Those are some really tough teams this year. So USC being at six, you can maybe argue they could be a spot or two lower, but somebody has to be fifth or sixth, and I do think that USC overall is a team that has a lot of hype, and six is definitely not a bad place for them to be. Penn State at number seven, Drew Ayler is a big reason why. Five-star recruit at quarterback. Sean Clifford finally gone, and a lot of Nittany Lions fans think that Drew Ayler is going to have Penn State reach heights that Sean Clifford can never get him to. Maybe they'll beat Michigan and Ohio State this year. Who knows? But I do feel like Penn State is a fringe college football playoff contender. I think they'll have a shot, and I don't think number seven is necessarily a bad spot for them. Florida State and Clemson at 8-9 is interesting, and it's really crazy to see Florida State ahead of Clemson. This is the first time that an ACC team has been ranked ahead of Clemson in a very long time. It's been probably almost a decade. Clemson has been the perennial ACC power every single year, but Florida State with Jordan Travis back, maybe a Heisman candidate, who knows there. there. He could be a guy that can help the Florida State Seminoles reach heights that they've not reached since the Jimbo Fisher era. Maybe get back to a national championship game. Maybe that's stretching it a little bit, but Florida State is looking really good this year. But I do think possibly I'd still put Clemson ahead of them because Dabo Swinney's more proven than Mike Norvell as a coach, and Cade Klubnik has a lot of hype. He could be really good this season. Clemson probably still has more talent on the roster as a whole, despite the fact that Florida State has done a much better job in the transfer portal. Dabo Swinney has not recruited the portal. Mike Norvell and Florida State has, and that's probably why people are buying more into Florida State. And Jordan Travis is a more proven quarterback than Cade Klubnik. But I still put Clemson out of Florida State, but both teams are going to be neck and neck potentially for that ACC title this season. And I do think that both teams are deserving of a top 10 ranking. Now we start getting to teams that are probably not going to be college football playoff contenders, but you never know. Maybe one or two teams from this group will have a shot. Washington at 10, I get it because Michael Penix, he was fantastic last season. He showcased a lot of talent at Indiana, but he never had an offensive line to protect him. But now at Washington, he does. Kalen DeBoer is a great head coach. They have that chemistry. Back when they were at Indiana, when Kalen DeBoer was the offensive coordinator and Penix was the quarterback, now Kalen DeBoer is the head coach of Washington. It's all working out there. The defense for Washington is not bad, but I do think it needs to improve. Roma Dunze's back. He's a fantastic receiver. I think Washington, though, might be a little bit high. I'm not saying that they're overrated at all, and I think Penix is going to have a fantastic season again. But there is a lot of good teams in the Pac-12, and it's going to be really hard for Washington to finish the season at number 10 with the schedule that they're going to have to face. But I definitely don't think that them being at 10 is a bad pick as well because they are a really solid team. Texas at 11. Is this the year Texas is back? We'll have to see. It's going to be really interesting to see if the Longhorns can find a way to win the Big 12. They have the talent to get it done, and Quinn Ewers is trying to fend off Arch Manning for that quarterback spot. I think Quinn Ewers, if he can get back to the level of play that he was playing at in that Alabama game before he got hurt, I think Texas has a shot to win the Big 12. It's going to be really interesting to see how good Texas is, but they definitely have the talent to be the number 11 team in the country. Tennessee at number 12, I understand why they dropped because Hendon Hooker's gone. Tennessee's defense really struggled last season, and Joe Milton still has a lot of question marks. Nico Iamaleava, he's going to be a really young quarterback, and I don't think he's going to be ready to play this season at all whatsoever. So Joe Milton, the Volunteers are going to have to ride with, and he's a guy that still a lot of people potentially do not trust overall. But I do think Tennessee falling to 12, you can maybe argue is a bit far based on the way that they played last season, especially beating Clemson in the bowl game last year. But I don't think 12 is necessarily a bad spot for them either. Notre Dame at 13, really interesting because Notre Dame had a lot of slip-ups last year, but they did win their bowl game against South Carolina, and they looked very good in that win. But Tyler Buckner's gone, but they've got Sam Hartman in. And Sam Hartman's a fantastic quarterback from Wake Forest. I feel like Sam Hartman is going to potentially help Notre Dame's offense be the best that it's been in many years, but their defense and some of their positional groups on offense are still a little bit of question marks, and a lot of people question Marcus Freeman's ability to be able to lead Notre Dame to heights that even Brian Kelly could not get Notre Dame to, so it's going to be really interesting. I don't think 13 is necessarily a bad spot. A lot of these AP voters did rank these teams fairly well, but again, it's all speculation. We just don't know how good these teams are going to be right now. Utah's at number 14. Cam Rising's a fantastic quarterback. Kyle Whittingham, one of the most underrated coaches in college football. I think that Utah at 14 is fair. Some people would argue that they should be higher, and I think that they have a shot to win the Pac-12 again, especially if USC's defense is still really struggling and Utah's able to take advantage of that. But Utah at 14, I don't think is really a slight on the Utes. It's just overall, I don't know if their team is talented enough to be a team in the top 10, especially in the preseason right now. Now, to kind of hurry up and move through the rest of this list, you have the Oregon Ducks at 15. The Pac-12 is really represented this season, and it's kind of a fitting way to have the twilight of the Pac-12 with all these teams being so solid. It's really sad to see that the Pac-12 is going away after this year as we know it, but again, a nice swan song for the conference. They have all these teams at the top of these rankings. Oregon at 15, again, is a really solid spot for them. I kind of feel like Oregon overall is a little bit of a mystery. They're kind of a team that a lot of people are wondering how good that they're going to be. Yes, Bo Nix is back, and I feel like he's going to have a lot of success, but they did lose some talent to the draft, and I just feel like overall it's going to be really tough for Oregon to be able to compete at the top of the Pac-12 because I do feel like Washington and USC and maybe even Utah are ahead of them, and Oregon did lose to Oregon State last year, but that was on the road. Maybe they'll be able to get revenge on the Beavers now that they're back at home in the rivalry game this year, but I do feel like Oregon at 15, you could maybe argue they're a little too high or a little too low. I think it's about right, but I maybe would have them a spot or two lower. Kansas State and TCU out of the Big 12 are next. And Kansas State, they had a bad loss to Alabama in the bowl game, but that is not reflective of how good that Kansas State was. They were a really solid team last year. And I do feel like even though Adrian Martinez is gone, Will Howard was the quarterback for Kansas State State for the most part last year. He's back, and even though Deuce Vaughn is gone, that's a big blow not having him return, but I do feel like Will Howard still can have a lot of success for Kansas State possibly this season, and I do think they'll be one of the better Big 12 teams. You can maybe argue they could be a little bit lower since they are a bit of a mystery as a team overall, but not a bad spot for Kansas State. TCU at 17 is a massive drop, but I understand it for sure. They lost Condre Miller, they lost Max Duggan, they lost Quentin Johnson. That's a lot of talent on offense is gone. I feel like TCU's defense was solid, but their offense is what really helped them have a lot of success last season, and I do think that TCU's drop is justified overall. It's going to be interesting to see how they perform right out of the gate, but I don't think that TCU's fall to 17 is necessarily unfair overall. Oregon State at number 18 are the last Pac-12 team on this list, and the Beavers have DJ Uiagalelei. He could possibly be the most talented quarterback that they've had in like the last 10 to 15 years. He is a guy that has all the tools to be a great quarterback, but he is also a player that makes a lot of mistakes, and he just can never find his footing in the Clemson offense after that first season where he came in for Trevor Lawrence and had some success. It's going to be interesting to see how he performs at Oregon State. I do feel like that the Beavers are an underrated team sometimes. They have solid defensive players, and their offense is actually sneaky good. And now that they have a quarterback that could be a lot better than the quarterbacks that they had playing for them last season, I think Oregon State could possibly be better than this, but it's going to be really interesting to see how they perform. I don't think 18 is a bad spot for the Beavers. Wisconsin's at 19, and this is the first team where I feel like that they're ranked a little bit high. I know that Luke Fickell is a stud coach. He was great at Cincinnati, and they have brought in a lot of talent like Tanner Mordecai, quarterback, and they've got some other really good pieces to build around him as well, and their defense is always really solid. And I know that Wisconsin's in the Big Ten West. It's the last year of the Big Ten West, and it's always an easier schedule than the teams in the Big Ten East, but I still believe Wisconsin is a bit high. It's his first year as a head coach. There's going to be some bumps up and down the road for the Badgers, and they might have some struggles right out of the gate. So I do think that Wisconsin could be a couple spots lower. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be ranked, but I would probably put them in the 20s. Now we're getting to the teams at the back end of the AP Top 25. Oklahoma's at 20. Really interesting for the Sooners because they have the talent to be really good. Dylan Gabriel's back at quarterback, and you have Brent Venables in his second season. Maybe he'll do a bit better of a job this time around as the head coach of Oklahoma than in his first season. And in his defense, Oklahoma had a lot of players that transferred out of the program in his first season, so he didn't really have a complete roster. Oklahoma has built up a lot of players through the transfer portal. They've gotten a lot of good defensive players, and overall, I feel like the talent level is back up for Oklahoma, so there is a shot that they could be a really solid team. There are still a lot of question marks for Oklahoma, and I can see why a lot of people would say that they don't deserve to be in the top 25, but based on talent alone, they are a top 25 team, at least to start the season. North Carolina's at 21, and all of the hype for the Tar Heels is because of Drake May, and they've got an extremely tough game against South Carolina to start the season. They're a team that's right outside the top 25. You could argue that they should be ranked as well, but North Carolina is a team that if Drake May plays at a Heisman-like level this season and their defense can improve, I feel like North Carolina will be a top 25 team, especially because the ACC doesn't have the toughest teams in the conference overall. I feel like North Carolina can rack up a lot of fairly easy wins that way, but still North Carolina needs to improve on defense, and if Drake May does not have the type season that he had last year, and he doesn't have Josh Downs at wide receiver like he had last season, North Carolina could fall out of the top 25, but I think at least to start having them ranked is justified just because of Drake May alone. Ole Miss is at 22. I've seen a lot of people say that Ole Miss should not be ranked, and I kind of understand that because Ole Miss, they do recruit well, and Lane Kiffin is a solid coach, and they had a good season last year at 8-5, but Ole Miss is in the SEC West. It's always tough to win in that division. They've got a really tough schedule, and if Jackson Dart does not get protected very well, which he got sacked a lot last season, I feel like he will have success this year. And you also have Spencer Sanders as well that's transferred to Ole Miss. It's going to be really interesting to see who starts at quarterback for the Rebels, but I do feel like Ole Miss is a team that could fall out of the top 25, but I do think they have enough talent to be a top 25 team. It's going to be really tough in the SEC West. And speaking of the SEC West, you've got the Texas A&M Aggies, and if a lot of people feel like Ole Miss shouldn't be ranked, probably Texas A&M is even higher on the list because they were awful last season. They were 5-7, and for a team that had the #1 recruiting class last year, and they had top 5 classes every year before that, A&M should have been way better than 5-7. They had a lot of issues with the roster. A lot of players have transferred out, but Jimbo Fisher's brought a lot of talent back into the program. Texas A&M has the talent to be even better than the 23rd team in the country, but if they can't get it all together, then I can definitely see Texas A&M having another season where they really struggle. Tulane's at 24, and this is based off the fact that they had a lot of success last season. I know why they're ranked, but Tulane's a team that they probably should not be ranked to start the year because of the fact they are losing a lot of talent that they had last season. Tajay Spears is gone, and I know that they have some talent coming back, but Tulane is a team I feel is going to have a tough time to replicate the success they had last year. I get why they're ranked. I respect the fact that they're ranked because of how they performed last season, and they beat USC in the bowl game, but Tulane's not going to be the same team that they were last year overall. And to round out the top 25, we have the Iowa Hawkeyes, the team that everyone talks about their offense, how it needs to improve, or they're never going to be an elite team, and the same team that has a fantastic defense as well, but again, their offense really needs to improve. I feel like Iowa has a fairly easy schedule in the Big Ten West, just like Wisconsin. That really helps prop them up of being a top 25 team. Their defense is definitely top 10 to 15 material, but again, their offense is what's holding them back. I do feel like Iowa has a shot to end the season ranked in the top 25 because they brought in Cade McNamara, and I do feel like that their offense will get a little bit better just because of that. But again, if their offense does not get significantly better, then there is a shot Iowa could slip up in 4 or 5 games and not finish the season ranked. But I definitely understand why Iowa is ranked in the top 25 because they usually are an 8-14, which is around the late 20s that you're ranked at the end of the season if you are 8-4. And again, Iowa's defense is fantastic yet again this season. And now to get to the other receiving votes, you have Texas Tech, South Carolina, UCLA, UTSA, Arkansas, Boise State, Pittsburgh, Kentucky, Louisville, Troy, Kansas, Auburn, Minnesota, Toledo, Duke, Mississippi State, Florida, Illinois, Baylor, Coastal Carolina, South Alabama, NC State, James Madison, and Liberty to round out the other receiving votes. You have teams like South Carolina, UCLA, Texas Tech, even Pittsburgh that have some hype coming into the season that maybe possibly they should be ranked. I think that they all have a shot to potentially be ranked at some point during the season. Don't know if they'll finish the season ranked, but definitely they have some talent there. Louisville has a fairly easy schedule. Maybe they can crack their way in Jeff Brohm's first season as the head coach into the top 25. Kansas is nice to see them in the other receiving votes. Kansas is much better with Lance Leopold than they've been in the past. But then you have teams like Auburn and Mississippi State and Florida, teams that are usually ranked out of the SEC that are not ranked right now. That just shows you how many good teams that there are in the SEC overall. Arkansas as well is not ranked. But it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. Always, every single year, the AP Top 25 poll, when the voters do their best to possibly rank the teams where they feel like they're going to be this season. But there's no way to know until these teams get out there on the field. A lot of teams are going to end up being worse than we think that they're going to be right now, and vice versa. There's going to be some teams that we don't think are going to be that good, and they end up being a lot better than we think. Definitely can't wait for college football. I know most college football fans are excited for the season. It's going to be awesome, and I definitely cannot wait to see the game start in less than 2 weeks. Comment down below what you think about the preseason AP Top 25 poll in college football for 2023, and whether there's some teams that you feel that are ranked higher or lower than you initially thought that they were going to be. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I will see you next time.